we read in the last week's parsha how Avram, he's told after the battle with the four kings that he has nothing to worry about, that he depleted all his merits as a result of the victory, and maybe he killed people who were tzaddikim, and he's culpable for this. Hashem says, you have nothing to worry. Al tir Avram, you have nothing to worry about. Meaning, you don't have to take with these people who are not tzaddikim. Schorcha b'meod. Your reward is enormous. It hasn't been depleted. Not only has it been depleted, it's been increased. Then he says to him that ultimately your children will be like the dust of the earth. And so Avram says to Hashem, what's it all worth? My administrator of all my holdings, he's going to be my heir. Damesek Eliezer. Hashem says, no. The one who will come from your loins, he will be heir. You can have a natural son. So there's an obvious question. When he left Choram to go to Canaan, Hashem says, I will make you into a great nation. So if that's the case, although he hadn't had the son yet, what's he concerned that Eliezer is going to be the son? That he's going to be his heir. Hashem says you can have a son. Didn't happen yet, but it's going to happen. So what's he concerned about? But he's concerned that Hashem says, factually, you will have a son, and that son will come from your loins. Yeah. It'll be a physical son. Why would Avram think differently? So, and that pasuk, Eliezer is referred to as Damesek Eliezer. So literally, the word Damesek means he was from Damascus. Eliezer, the Damascus, came from Damascus. However, the Gemara says no. The word Damesek, and Rashi cites one of the interpretations, that he was Dodo Mashka B'Torah Sharabo. That all that Avram had known about Torah, he taught Eliezer, and Eliezer was his partner in disseminating Torah to the world. So if that's the case, Eliezer was mentored by Avram in every aspect of spirituality, and whatever Hashem communicated to Avram, he communicated to Eliezer. And Eliezer was a disseminator. We read in Bamidbar, we speak about the children of Aaron, and all of a sudden we speak about the children of Moshe, and we mentioned who are Moshe's children? Nodav, Avihu, Elozi, Somar. So immediately the Gemara asks, and Rashi cites the question, speak about Aaron's children. They weren't not Moshe's children. So from there we learn, Torah ben Chavero, that if you teach Torah to your fellow son, it's Kilu Yoldo. It's a halachic son. It's as if you gave birth to that person. So Eliezer before was a Canaanite. Every aspect and every connection to spirituality at the most advanced level that Eliezer had was through Avram Avinu. So Avram Avinu, if the purpose of a person's existence is his neshama, is his spirituality, so who had the greatest impact, the most profound, overwhelming effect on Eliezer's life? Avram. So Avram thought, in all these years, I haven't had a child. Maybe Eliezer, Damesek based, that's what he's mentioned as Damesek. In this particular context, he's the Damascus, not Damascus. He come from Damascus. What does it have to mention? Hashem knows where he's coming from. He's saying, but he's Damesek Eliezer. He's my mentored Torah student, so maybe that's how the promise is being fulfilled. Hashem says no. The way it's being fulfilled, if a child that comes from your loins. Now, we find that when Eliezer was sent to find a wife for Yitzchak, Eliezer says that maybe the woman will not want to come back. Ulai. Ulai, but the word Ulai is written with the vav deleted, so without the vowels it could be read Elai. So Rashi over there cites the Midrash. He may very often the person asks a question, but the question you ask speaks volumes of where you're coming from. I mean, why would Eliezer think for a moment that when he goes to take a member of his family, they're not going to want to come back. The answer is because you have a conflict of interest. That Eliezer had a daughter who was a tzaddikus. She was raised by him, and he couldn't understand why do you have to send me to the other end of the world to find a wife for Yitzchak? Why can't my daughter be the matriarch of Klal Yisrael? She will be the matriarch. So on that, Avram explained to him, because you're a Canaanite, and the genealogy of Canaan is cursed. I come from Shem. Shem is blessed. You cannot build a Klal Yisrael on a cursed stock. Therefore, as a result of that, even though your daughter has this great share in the world to come, but to build an eternal nation, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. If that's the case, I have to go to my family because we all share the same similar genealogy. They are from my family. Now, how did Avram know this? Have this such profound understanding that it has to be from his family, can't be Eliezer's daughter, although she's this devout woman, and Hashem may sing her praises because of what she was in terms of holiness. So the way I understand it is because initially when Avram had said to Hashem, what's it all worth? Damascus Eliezer is going to be my heir. So Hashem says, no. The child that comes from your loins is here. So what did it say? But if we say factually that Torah ben Chaveros Kil Yoldo, if Eliezer within the halachic context actually is considered his son, what do you have to have a regular son? What was the question Avram said? The answer is because Eliezer was Canaan. That was his point. Hashem says, you don't have anything to worry about. Your child will be your child. It's not going to be a halachic child. It'll be a physical child. Therefore, the genealogy of that child will be your genealogy. At that moment, Hashem confirmed that Eliezer, regardless what his child may be, that woman doesn't qualify to be the matriarch of Klal Yisrael. That was exactly the back and forth at this moment. Although he's Damascus Eliezer, doesn't make a difference. He could be Moshe Rabbeinu off the mountain. But if his genealogy is not the same as ours, it's a different reality. And Hashem confirmed it.
Huh.
1 second. Besides, we had said at the time of the Akedah, after the angel called to Avram from heaven with one hand, Avram had a question immediately. Who's my son going to marry? So immediately, at that moment, he received through divine communication that Rivka was born to his family. So he knew factually the future matriarch is waiting for him to be taken. And he waited 3 years. 3 years later, when Yitzchak came back from the Har Moriah, he sends Eliezer on this mission. So Eliezer says, maybe she's not going to want to come. Not possible. Because he already was told, which he never shared with Eliezer, that the future matriarch of Klal Yisrael was born, and he knew it was Rivka. Now we have to, so what did he say? He said, the Malach who saved me all along, that Malach will go with you, will guarantee that your mission's will be successful. But he knew because it already was communicated to him that Rivka is going to be, was born already specifically for this purpose.
Rabbi, just very simple.
Eliezer says in the Yalkut, which is a compilation of Medrash, when he went to Choron, and it says he went to a wellspring and he prayed to Hashem that the young maiden that comes out and offers water, whole story. So finally, he puts the bracelets on Rivka's arms and the nose ring. She goes, tells her family, who comes running? Lavan, her brother, because when he saw the gold, the wealth, immediately, he got all excited. When he sees Eliezer, he thinks he sees his uncle Avram. Eliezer radiated like Avram Avinu. And you know what he wanted to do? He wanted to kill him. Lavan wanted to kill Eliezer because he thought he was Avram Avinu. So Eliezer, being so mentored by Avram, he said an incantation. He was suspended at a level was beyond Lavan's reach. He couldn't touch him, couldn't hurt him. And when Lavan saw who he was dealing with, he backed down. But this is literally, ultimately, fast forward with Yaakov, Arami Oboyonovi. When he pursued Yaakov, he wanted, if he would have caught him, he would have killed him. And Hashem intervened, said, don't touch him. Not good, not bad, just lay off. But the Rami Ovid already was earlier. When Eliezer came and he believed this was Avram, was his uncle. He was going to kill his uncle because he represents what he's not. But you see, the Torah which Avram taught Eliezer, to what degree it affected him. It affected him that he radiated identically as his master. So he thought, so if that's the case, why doesn't my daughter qualify? And I raised my daughter, and maybe she also radiated. You can radiate, but what's your gene pool? What's your genealogy? What's the makeup? It's cursed. You can't build an eternal people on cursed stock. It has to be purebred from both sides, the matriarch and the patriarch. It tells us that there's certain characteristics which are innate in every Jew. It's mentioned many times. Jews have an exceptional, one-of-a-kind type of compassion. By Shonim, we have shame, we have conscience. There's no conscience like the Jewish conscience. And Gomli Chasodim. The Gemilas Chesed of a Jew, there's no nation in the world which can compare to what the Chesed that Jews do. Okay? Why do we have those innate characteristics?
Avram Avinu.
Part of our genealogy, because that was Avram Avinu. So not only are we heirs of the physical genes, which touches us physically, even our spiritual genes are rooted in Avram Avinu. So therefore, the Gemara says that if you come upon a person who doesn't have these characteristics, you have to question his pedigree. Maybe he comes from converts. He's a convert. He's not an original Jew. So you see that even though a person converts, he converts, and he has a share in the world to come, he has all that. But his genealogy is the same genealogy. That genealogy is not a Jewish genealogy. And therefore, he doesn't have those inborn characteristics. Doesn't have it. So even though now he's part of the Klal Yisrael, but he's not part of any tribe. A ger is not part of any tribe. A convert does not have a share in the land. The only people who had a share in the land, he had to be one of the tribes. So he's like nondescript. But in terms of his neshama, what's embedded in that neshama aren't these characteristics. It's possible, yes, the person can have those, but it's not because the person inherited those characteristics. They have not. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest Jew ever lived, he married a convert. Zipporah was the daughter of what? The daughter of Yisro. So what were her genes? And the Gemara says, when Aaron married Elisheva bas Aminodov, Achos Nachshon, the Torah identifies her as the sister of Nachshon. Why? Because the Gemara asks, why were Aaron's children so special and Moshe's children were not special? Moshe Rabbeinu is the father. So it says because it depends who you marry. Aaron married the sister of the prince of the tribe of Yehuda, which is Malchus, which is royalty. That's why he had special children. Because very often, the characteristics of the children take after the characteristics of the brother of the wife. That's the reason. So and that's why the Torah identifies her. Elisheva bas Aminodov achos Nachshon. When it speaks about who his wife was, it should say Elisheva, the daughter of Aminodov. What do you have to speak about the brother? To teach us, to tell us, the reason why he had special children is because you see the genealogy of the family from the brothers. Moshe, his wife, was a convert. She didn't have that genealogy. That's why Moshe's children were not special for that reason. So you see clearly, but she converted. She converted, so what's the problem? Conversion is only in terms of what you're worthy of. It doesn't change your essence in terms of your genealogy. You may have positive genes. She had positive. Yisro was positive. He was the person who came back, gave up everything for the sake to become part of Klal Yisrael. We have a parsha named after him. He had a level of clarity, but factually, he wasn't original. He wasn't from a descendant of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Therefore, he was a convert. Now, it's interesting. There's a famous Tanit Ve'Elio that the aspiration of every Jew has to be Moshe Yagiyev the Maseh Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. What are my achievements are going to be as great as Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Moshe Agir Maseh Avosai, that I'll achieve as to the actions of my forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I mean, you know, if I want to be wealthy, I want to be as wealthy as Elon Musk, not somebody's worth only $100 million. Why not? We're not talking about small change, right? If Alan would have that kind of money, he would have never gone to medical school. He would have built a yeshiva and he would have been a Rosh Yeshiva, right? So why are we speaking about? And if you'd say you'd be as great as Rabbi Akiva wasn't great. He was the greatest Torah sage in that period, in that era of Tanoim. I'll be as great as Hillel. I'll be as great as Abaye Rava. I'll be as great as the Rambam. Why shouldn't that be my aspiration? The answer they give is, if you shoot for the stars, you go to a further distance. So therefore, if you want to maximize and succeed to the greatest, shoot for the stars. Who are the stars? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's the answer they give. But I said differently. What is our genealogy? Person doesn't even realize what his capacity is. We're not connected to Moshe. Moshe was a Jew like we're a Jew. He was the greatest Jew. Hillel was a great Jew, but all the connections, we share a common genealogy. He was a Jew, we're a Jew. He had a greater capacity. But every Jew, if he's the descendant of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the genealogy is their genealogy. So whatever they were, you have relevance to what they were, because that's part of your genealogy. What Moshe was, he's not necessarily part of your genealogy. That he was endowed with something very specific. Therefore, the reason why I say a person, when his aspirations, Yaakov, because they are our genealogy. Whatever they were, that's what we are. To what degree, we have no idea. But as the Rambam says, I said many times, every Jew could be as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. Every Jew is endowed with a potential. The profile of that potential is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's the profile. To what degree could you succeed? Each person has his own potential. But if you meet that potential that you're meant to meet, less than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness was that he met his potential. Even though his potential is the equivalent of the whole Jewish people combined, it doesn't make a difference. Therefore, the aspiration should be Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, not anyone else. I don't want to be anybody but. Because what they were, that's who I am. It goes back to what we're saying. The daughter of, even though he's Damesek, he drew from the well springs of his teacher, of his master, and disseminated monotheism and Torah to whatever it was. But what his genealogy was from, he was from a cursed stock. And you can't build an eternal nation on cursed, it has to be blessed. Therefore, that's the reason why Eliezer's daughter did not qualify to be the matriarch, as special as she was.
Rabbi, I know you mentioned about Achos Nachshon, but the lesson actually was before, right? I mean, Rivka
just got knocked out.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, good.
But the lesson, I know you mentioned Achos Nachshon. You learn from the.
What you're saying is correct. The Rechaim HaKodesh explains when we speak about Rivka being, it says she was the daughter of Besuel, the sister of Lavan.
Right.
So the question is, what do we speak about? She's the sister of Lavan. So Rashi brings the Medrash that although her community were Rishoyim, her father was a Rasha, and her brother was Rishon, she was a tzaddik. She was devoutly righteous. The Rechaim HaKodesh says no. The reason why we're identified as the sister of Lavan, and he cites the Gemara that we say by Aaron, why it's special children. If you look at the brothers, if Rivka is going to be the future matriarch of Klal Yisrael, Yitzchak should have never married her, because you have a chance of having your child to have the characteristics of Lavan. Right. This is the Rechaim HaKodesh. And he said like this: if he would have had an alternative to marry, he wouldn't have married Rivka. But since she was the only woman in the world who qualified to be a matriarch, he had to take that chance. Yeah, as I said, Hashem runs the show. So as a result of the Esav was an exaggerated Lavan. He outpaced Lavan in what he was. But on the other hand, there was Yaakov. If there would have been one child, it had to be a Yaakov. If there are two, one could be an Esav, one could be a Yaakov. That's the Rechaim HaKodesh.
Right. Right, right.
So how did Avram know? How did Avram know? Avram knew that there was a son, Lavan. How did he take a chance? The answer is because at the Al-Qaeda, Hashem communicated to him that Rivka was born and she's supposed to be the matriarch. As a result of that, you don't ask questions. If Hashem says she's the matriarch, there's nothing to talk about. She's the matriarch. We say Masa Ovasim Labanim, that the experiences of the patriarchs foretells the future. For instance, it says in the Medrash, Avram, there was a famine, he had to go to Egypt. He left Egypt, he left with tremendous wealth. Why? Because in the future, Klal Yisrael will go to Egypt. Then we're going to spend so much time there. And when we leave Egypt, what did we leave with? Achen Yisrael went out with tremendous wealth. That the least amount of wealth that every Jew took out of Egypt was 10 pack animals laden with gold and silver. Always mentioned, the only non-kosher species where there's a law that it has Kedushas Bechora, that when it goes through the womb of its mother, it's holy, is the donkey. Even though the donkey is not kosher species, it doesn't even have any one of the kosher signs. So Chazal tell us why. Because the donkey was facilitated the being a beast of burden. That Kiddush Hashem that Hashem said you will go out with great wealth was facilitated through the donkey. As a result of that, that's why the donkey has Kedushas Bechora. That's Kedusha. And therefore it has to be redeemed. You could redeem it, or as it says, you decapitate it. One of you have a choice. That's why it's the Kedusha. But why? But Avram had to go to Egypt to create the dynamic that ultimately the Jews are going to Egypt. And when we leave, ultimately, we leave with wealth, one of a kind of wealth. Now, it's interesting. Where was that wealth? Egypt, as it says in Chazal, that there was a famine in Egypt. Yosef was appointed to be the viceroy. If the one who distributed all the wealth, who sold it, wasn't an honest person, all that wealth wouldn't have been in the coffers of Egypt. It would have been squandered. Yosef being the viceroy, Yosef being Yosef HaTzadik, every level of value was stored away for the government. And there were vaults that he stored away. The Egyptians, as it says, they depleted the world of all the wealth because the famine affected that whole region. If you wanted food, you had to come to Egypt to buy food. So they depleted the wealth of the world. Egypt was at the height of power and wealth, nothing compared to it. What did the Egyptians believe? We're wealthy. One of a kind of wealth. Wealth is power. They didn't realize they're only treasures for the Jews. Because when the Jews are going to leave in 210 years, they're going to take every bit of that wealth with them. Every bit of it. Because even the wealth of the sea, that the chariots were covered, bedecked with gold and silver and diamonds, that was the wealth of the government. Because everybody borrowed the personal effects of the individuals. This was the wealth of the government. So it comes out interesting. The famine was part of the story. As when Avram left Egypt, he left with this one of a kind of wealth. Because Egypt didn't have the wealth of the world, but they were the height of civilization. When we leave, we're leaving with wealth. What kind of wealth? One of a kind of wealth. So they believed, they're endowed, they're gifted with the wealth.
Good.
It's not for you, it's for the Jews. That's what it's all about. So the whole concept, Maisa Ovasim Labanim, the Avos, since certain things have to happen in the future, and what is the ultimate purpose? To reach the goalpost. To come home. What do we have to achieve? We have to arrive at Sinai. All this is a prerequisite to Sinai. Whenever we talk about a watershed moment, you know what happens? Something doesn't allow it to happen. Doesn't allow it. What does Hashem do? He already sets the dynamic generations before. Something doesn't even understand it. Avram being the founding father of the Jewish people, and Sarah Imeinu, being the founding matriarch of the Jewish people, they go to Egypt. Because the Jews have to go to Egypt to atone for the sin of Avram Avinu. And that's why we're going to Egypt years later, generations later. When we leave Egypt, we have to leave with wealth. Part of the wealth is to build the Mishkan. The other wealth is for other reasons, which we discussed in the past, which we will discuss again. So Satan being kept under, not knowing, kept in the dark. If he would know, he would have immediately not allowed it to happen. It would have been divulged right away that this is Sarah is not his sister. It's his wife. But it had to take on this guise because this had to happen. And he left with that kind of wealth. The battle of the 4 kings against the 5 kings. Those two were at Lot. And he was in Sodom. Sodom was destroyed. And ultimately, he committed incest with his daughters. And 2 children were born. What was the value of that? Right? And they were born with special neshamas. His daughters. Ultimately, Rus came from the elder daughter. Melch Mashiach. Like we discussed many times, it's incest. If Sod would know that this would ultimately bring Mashiach, he wouldn't allow it to happen. Wouldn't allow it. Incest. And it says, why did Avram separate from Lot? Because he didn't want to be associated with a man who committed incest. No, that's Sutton's camp. Incest, whatever it is. But little did he know that ultimately, generations later, Rusa Movia is going to be the grandmother of David HaMelech, which is ultimately Malchus-based David, which ultimately is Mashiach. You see the way things fall in place when they're supposed to. In advance, Hashem sets the dynamic that things should fall in place later. One second. Nochor was not affected by Avram.
Right,
But
sounds like.
Haran was. Now, and Haran ultimately, as I point out, is the first human being ever to die al Kiddush Hashem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that's why Avram was dedicated to his son Lot. Even though Lot was a bad guy, his behavior was totally unacceptable. He was didn't behave properly. Avram nevertheless went to bat for him to the nth degree. Because he was the son of his brother who gave his life.
Right, curse of
Now, if Lot wouldn't have come with Avram, let's say Haran wouldn't have died in the kiln. You know what that meant? That means Lot would have never come with Avram. If Lot wouldn't have come with Avram, he wouldn't have gone to Egypt. He wouldn't have become wealthy. He became wealthy only because he accompanied Avram to Egypt.
Right.
Because of that wealth, they separated. Because of that wealth, where did Lot go? He went to Sodom. Ultimately, when Sodom was destroyed, the only one who was saved was Lot and his daughters. Ultimately, the incest took place in the cave. So all that Haran died al Kiddush Hashem, his son, therefore his son went with Avram. Although if he had a father, he would have stayed in Haran together with his father, Haran.
Sure, no, I see.
Haran died. That's the reason why Lot went. But ultimately, all of this was orchestrated. So the question is, but Haran was impacted by Avram. Enough that he's willing to stand by the sidelines to see what's going to happen. Exactly for this reason.